Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a good day thus far. My name is Carrie Gruby-Liebarker. I'm the Administrator and Consumer Advocate over at the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. And it's my pleasure today to present to you the state of consumer credit in South Carolina. It's based on the report that we issue each year. So we're gonna kind of give highlights of that report. All right, so let's get into the state of credit report. So by law, our office is required to report on the state of credit in South Carolina and our enforcement operations. So we used to do this through what's called the accountability report, which is a report we have to do after every fiscal year. And it talks about the general operations that happened during that year. But in 2017, I believe it was, we started doing it as a standalone report because the accountability report was starting to change a little bit. So the report provides information and analysis of existing and emerging trends in consumer credit in the state of South Carolina. We take data from different filings that our office receives and the Board of Financial Institutions receives, and different reports received by both of the agencies to compile or assist with compiling the information here in the report. And then the years are going to be different. Some of the data is going to say it's from 2022, and some of the data is going to say it's from 2023, but it's delineated within those sections of which year we're looking at. So the main areas in the state of credit report are interest rates and creditors for those general filings, which are credit grantor notification and maximum rate schedules received by the Department of Consumer Affairs. Then we're going to look at consumer lending, supervised loans, deferred presentment, and pawnbrokers fall in that category. Then we'll look at credit counseling activity, mortgage lending, and recent enforcement actions of the department. So what is credit grantor notification? So generally at the department, we administer and enforce the Uniform Consumer Credit Code. And part of that is a requirement that if somebody is grossing in excess of $150,000 in the area of sales, loans, leases, or rent to own, they essentially have to notify the department that they are doing that business in South Carolina. And so it's somebody who has an office or a place of business in the state, or they take assignment or direct collection of payments or enforcement regarding sales, loans, leases, or rent to own. And it does include websites. We consider that a location for a business. And the majority of it that we see is dealing with sales, credit sales, and loans. So here's the number of filings that we received from 2020 to 2023. And this data, as you can see, does go through 2023 because the way the filings go and whenever we have to start compiling the information for the state of credit report. So the total number of creditors that filed credit grantor notifications increased slightly compared to 2022. So it was at 1648 and went up to 1701, but the number of filing locations and the total filings by transaction type did decrease. As far as maximum rate filings goes, these are only filed by those who engage in credit sales and loans where they are assessing an APR in excess of 18%. So the maximum rate schedules are essentially just self-imposed limits by the creditors. The state doesn't tell them a maximum that they can charge, but they can only charge what's on file if it's above that 18%. And it has to be filed in every credit category that the creditor offers as well. And essentially the rate schedule, because we don't have interest rate caps, it's meant to foster competition and help encourage the informed use of consumer credit, right? So consumers are made aware of what these maximum rates are so that they can compare rates and understand the overall terms. And the maximum rates that are filed have to be posted in the place of business as well as they are on our website so folks can search those and do their own comparison. So essentially it's that the market is going to set the rate because competitors are going to know whatever everybody's charging and consumers are going to know what everybody's charging. So the number of maximum rate filings by creditor and location between 2020 and 2023, it did decrease a little bit as far as locations, but the number of creditors filing, similar to credit grantor, did go up a little bit in 2023. And the total maximum rate filings for loans versus credit sales, you can see that loans is certainly the heavier lift there. We get the majority of filings do come out of the loan category. But in 2023, we saw a little bit of a decrease for the maximum rate filings for loans and an increase in those for credit sales. APR is definitely an area where we see differences between consumer loans and credit sales. And, you know, the loan is whenever you're going to a third party to get money to go buy a product or a service from a different person. That's a loan, right? It's the person who's giving you that money so you can take it somewhere else and get a product or a service. A credit sale is whenever you're getting a product or a service, but you're getting the financing through the person who's also selling you the product or service. And so oftentimes there's a security interest that's in that particular product that the credit seller is going to take an interest in. And so that may be one of the reasons why the rates are so much lower. But you can see here that the average fixed APR for a consumer loan exceeded the average fixed APR for a credit sale by approximately 55%. And that's not abnormal. That's definitely what we've seen year over year around that amount. Maximum rate filings by APR range, and this has a comparison from 2020 to 2023. I think in the next year report, we might even add more data to this so we really have a long trend analysis for these filings, because it certainly has ebbed and flowed. I know that in 2015 is really where we saw the spike in triple digit lending. But here you can see that 53% of creditors in 2023 filed APRs of 36.99% or less, which that's about average. But for the first time in at least 4 years, the 30 to 36.99% category had the most filings. So it was 22.41%. The largest decrease in APR filings took place in the 50 to 99.99% category. And so that one went from 25.82% down to 21.37%. You can see kind of that downward trend from 2020 to 2023 in that category. And then, yeah, it's almost 8% between 2020 and 2023. And then we saw the largest increase occur in the 100% to 199.99% APR category with a 2% increase there. And there are approximately 16% of our filers intend to charge triple digit APRs. And when we get to the supervised lending portion of the presentation, we'll kind of break out so you can see who is the one, or what's the group of folks at supervised lenders who are charging the above 50%. So looking at counties and the average of fixed maximum APR filed by counties, we had the highest average of fixed APR period was 200 and almost 29%, but that came from out-of-state lenders. And that's about 82% higher than the highest in-state average, which was 125, almost 126%. Aiken County had the highest in-state average. So you can see them down at the bottom in the dark blue. And then the highest APR filed overall was 850%. And that also came from out-of-state lenders, and it exceeds the highest in-state APR by 330%. So in the counties, the highest in-state APR that we see is 520% that was filed, and there are 37 counties that had that as the highest filed APR. Lee County held the spot for the highest average fixed APR for credit sales. And I'm just telling you this so again, you can see that comparison between loans and credit sales. So here again, loans, highest average fixed APR, Aiken at 120, almost 126%. In Lee County, it was 86.61% for credit sales. But we did see an increase in the highest APR filed in credit sales. It was 415%. I think previously it had been 350. Here's the average of fixed APR filed by type and category. So you're looking at credit sales and loans here. So the first two numbers are for your year-over-year comparison for loans, and the second two numbers are the year-over-year comparison for credit sales. And you can see that there were slight increases in secured and unsecured for the loans, a little bit of a decrease for open end for loans, and increases for secured real estate, a little bit of decrease for the other types of loans. For consumer credit sales, you saw a really large decrease when you looked at secured transactions. It went from 61% to 35%. But then the unsecured, you saw a little bit of an increase, and the open end, there was a little bit of a decrease, increase for real estate, and decrease for other. All right, so I'm going to see if there are any questions that we have on the general filings for the credit guarantor and max rate before we move into the supervised lending category. I'm not seeing any, so we'll move right along. But remember, you can feel free to put any question that you have in the box and we'll get to it shortly. So supervised loans. These are essentially consumer loans where the finance charge is more than 12% APR. And they're licensed with the South Carolina Board of Financial Institutions, and they're required to provide an annual report to the Board of Financial Institutions, it has a lot of information, including the total loans and the dollar amounts advanced, how many new borrowers they advanced money to, the APR, and just a lot of other information. That data is not allowed to be released on its own. It can only be published in a composite form, and that's some of the information that we'll have for you today. And even though the board licenses and examines supervised lenders, Title 37, that Consumer Protection Code, governs their behavior and sets forth what they can and cannot do in regards to a supervised loan, and they still have to make that maximum rate filing with our office too, and that's where we're going to get some of the initial data we're going to present on supervised lenders. So as far as maximum rate filings go by range, this is the comparison of filings by supervised lenders and then non-supervised lenders, which include banks, which is the other large category. Supervised lenders account for about 43% of all maximum rate filings. Last year, we did have a decrease in the number of supervised lender filings. It was about 17% less than in 2022, but they still held around, steady around 43%, which I think in 2022 is 44% for all the max rate filings that are received. The APR category that had the largest increase was in the triple digit, the 100 to 199.99 category, with a 6% increase over 2022. So we had about 12.3% of supervised lenders filed for that APR. This year, 6.62% had filed for an APR in that range in 2022. And then most filings fell into two APR categories. 34% filed for APRs ranging from 50 to 99.99%, and 19% filed for APRs of 300% or greater. But you can see that shift when we go from the 18% or less category to the 37% to 49.99%. You can see the shift from the non-supervised lenders getting over to the supervised lender category, and then how that continues down when you get into the 50 to 99% and then into those triple digits, how few non-supervised lenders charge or file that they're going to intend to charge within those limits. So supervised lending is a big business in South Carolina. So lender transactions decreased by 2.3% in 2022. This is from the annual report data, while the amount advanced to consumers increased by about 9%. So we're still close to $3 billion overall in the amount advanced to consumers. And then the highest and most frequent APR charge. So the maximum rate filing data is what folks file with us that they intend to charge, the maximum rate they intend to charge. So now we're looking at the annual report data, which is the actual APRs that were charged by supervised lenders. So after seeing a decrease in 2021, the highest APR and most frequent APR charged increased in almost every loan amount category. The largest increase occurred in the $600 or less category, with a 46% increase in the highest APR and approximately a 48% increase in the most frequent APR that was charged. Now we'll move on to deferred presentment services, aka payday lending. So there was a, deferred presentment services, they're in a different chapter, in chapter 39 of Title 34. There were some amendments that passed in 2009, the majority that became effective February 1, 2010. And this includes that there was a loan amount cap of $550 that you could get out from a payday lender at any one time, at any given time. It had been $300 before then, and it requires the deferred presentment licensee to check a database to determine if a person is allowed to get a loan out, because there are certain restrictions on that. And then the licensee is supposed to immediately report a deferred presentment transaction and payoffs in that database. The Board of Financial Institutions is the regulator of deferred presentment services, and you can go to their website for more information on licensing. Okay, so this is the annual report that was issued for data from calendar year 2022. So deferred presentment companies saw a 52% decrease overall in the number of transactions, the amount advanced, and the fees charged year over year. And you can see over to the side here, we have where it was in 2009 before the effective date of the new provisions. And you can see the marked contrast that there were 4 million transactions that calendar year versus the 150,000 essentially that occurred last year. Then almost 1 billion amount advanced versus the 65.8 million that was advanced in 2022. So we're going to kind of look at some trends that we've seen. I'm going back to 2018. So here you got the total number of transactions. As we said, it decreased 52%. But prior to 2020, the average decrease was between 6.6 and 9.5% annually. So you can kind of see in 2020 with COVID how much it decreased. And then they rebounded a little bit to where it wasn't such a large decrease. It was still a decrease, but then really dropped off last year. And then we see kind of a similar trend for the total amount advanced as well. All right, for pawnbrokers. So pawnbrokers are regulated by the Department of Consumer Affairs. And a pawnbroker business is somebody who's lending money on the security of pledged goods, or they're engaging in the business of purchasing tangible personal property on condition that it can be redeemed or repurchased by the seller for a fixed price within a fixed period of time. So we license by location, and then pawnbrokers are required to keep certain records, including documentation of a pawn or a purchase transaction by a pawnbroker. This law was it was amended, I think it was in 2016 or so, to create a database of pawn transactions as well, and it increased the amount that people could loan, that a pawnbroker could loan to a consumer, and so on. So total number of pawn transactions for a licensee, that information is data from 2022, and pawn transactions entered into in 2022 increased 21%, and that reversed a downward trend that had started during COVID. And then we have, which you'll see, they advanced about $50 million, which is a little less than your deferred presentment providers. And then we'll see the number of licensed pawnbrokers, and this information is from last calendar year. They rebounded a little bit from a slight decline in 2022. It really does hover around normally around 154. So credit counseling. Credit counseling companies are considered financial institutions under federal law. And here in South Carolina, it is a broad brush for who is considered a credit counseling company. So it's folks who offer or provide debt management and debt consolidation services, credit repair, or debt settlement or debt negotiation. They're licensed by our office, and then they also have to file an annual report. And the report covers certain information about the credit counseling business conducted during the prior calendar year. So this information is 2022 data. So credit counselors funneled over 26 million to consumers' creditors in 2022, and that was a 26% decrease over 2021. So it went from 36 million to 26 million. And then the average amount of consumer debt was $14,168, which was 28% less than in 2021, where it was almost $19,000. Before that, I mean, I'm having something pop in my head that in 2020 or in 2019, I think it was almost like $27,000 for the average amount of debt that folks had who were seeking credit counseling services. So that number has definitely declined. And then we have the average fee per contract, looking at debt management and credit repair. And then the second category, so it says average fee, and then it says average fee again. That's supposed to say average length per contract for the last two categories. So you can see the adjustments there, the differences between the fees for the debt management and credit repair services, and then the duration of contract as well. Because with credit repair, it's usually a short-term contract. As for debt management or debt consolidation services. It usually takes more time because over time you're trying to pay down your creditors. All right, I'm going to check to see if we have any questions on anything we've covered so far. All right, I'm not seeing any, so we'll keep moving and shaking. All right, so the department has regulated mortgage loan brokers since 1988 and loan originators since 2005. And then the South Carolina Board of Financial Institutions has regulated mortgage lenders and servicers and their mortgage loan originators since 2009. And both these groups of folks are supposed to provide an annual report to our office so that we can look at trends in certain mortgage data. And that report's called a mortgage log report. And the information contained here is going to include information from calendar year 2022, but there's a cutoff. The report's due March 31st, and so we have to issue the report by June 30th every year. So we have a cutoff of May 1st, and so numbers may change over time. But as of that date, May 1, 2023, the department received information from 192,000 mortgage applications that had been taken during calendar year 2022, and it's that data that we're going to go over momentarily. That amount was significantly less than what we saw for 2021, where there were almost 305,000 mortgage applications taken, but it is higher than the number of applications that were taken in 2020, which was around, well, it's not higher, it's still lower, 265,000, but higher than 2019, which was 163,000. 2018 it was 131,000, and 2017 it was 135. So the 192,000 is really kind of in the middle from what we've seen on the higher end of the spectrum in 2021 with the 304, and the lower end with the 2017 number of 135,000. So here we have data on the average loan amount, the average value of collateral, and average borrower's income that was taken from mortgage loan applications. So the average borrower's income continued to increase, and it's about 40,000 more than what we saw in 2011. In 2011, the average income was $56,000, and now it's up to over 100,000. The average appraised value of property topped out at 347,000. That's the highest we've seen since we've been compiling mortgage log data since 2011. And I mean, you can see there too, of course, if you have the average appraised value increasing, you're going to have the average loan amount go up too. And it just looks like a step there when you compare from 2017 to 2022. Average APR and credit score. So the APR, the average APR was 4.9%. And I remember when we were doing the mortgage log report last year where this data originated from, you know, I remember everybody talking about how the mortgage rates were so high, but when you look back over history, it's really now average from where we were prior to COVID. So I guess, you know, perspective is everything, but we definitely saw that shoot up, but the credit score has kind of, the average credit score has kind of stayed about the same over the last couple of years. But with that APR comes a shift in the loan purpose. So in 2020 and 2021, when you had that low APR, everybody, or lots of folks were refinancing, right? The purpose of the loan to purchase a home versus to refinance a current loan, they were very close together. But now that we've seen that shift in APRs, you see that shift where nobody's wanting to refinance because they have a better rate than what's currently out there. It is interesting, though, to see that home improvement loans did increase from 0.4% to 0.7%. Mortgage loan types, it's pretty explanatory, but just to give you ideas on the categories, conventional is anything that's not offered or secured by a governmental entity. FHA means Federal Housing Administration. It's part of the Housing and Urban Development Authority, and they insure a loan so that the lender can offer lower down payments, closing costs, and easier credit qualifications. The VA, so it's the Department of Veteran Affairs, and those loans are for veterans and active service members. And then FSA and RHS. FSA is a farm service agency. It's part of the Department of Agriculture, and they make and guarantee loans to beginning farmers who aren't able to get financing from other places. And the Rural Housing Service finances low-income borrowers in rural areas and guarantees those loans. So you can kind of see the shifts there. We saw, an increase in FHA loans, but a decrease in the other categories. All right, now we'll look at enforcement. So this is for fiscal year 2023, which runs from July 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2023. We had 269 enforcement actions, and just overall for the agency, we had outcomes of credits, refunds, and adjustments through efforts in complaint mediation, enforcement, and intervention and rate filings of about $4 million. It almost equaled our budget for that fiscal year, which is great. It definitely fluctuates from year to year due to the unpredictability of the kind of complaints that we're going to get, to see if there is a monetary value associated with those, or if there's enforcement actions that are going down a pike to where penalties may be issued there too. So it's kind of the complexities of the issues and what those look like. 269 is definitely lower than it was in the year previous than that, but again, it ebbs and flows. Our desire is that everybody complies with the law, but of course, one of our jobs is to enforce it, to encourage that compliance. So the majority of issues that we had were in the areas of credit grantor notification. So that's folks who likely did not file when they were supposed to file. Mortgage broker, similar, it could be not being licensed, unlicensed activity, or not filing, making appropriate filings and within the timing required. So that's it for the State of Credit Report. Hope the information was valuable to you. You can find it on our website. It's going to be under our news link, and there's not only this year's State of Credit Report, but if you want to look at data that goes beyond the 2017 or 2018 timeframe that we have in the majority of the charts, you can look as far back, I do believe, to 2017 to look at that report, which I think goes back even further to whatever data we could scrounge up for that initial one. I think we even have some 1980s APR data in that particular report. But we use the report too, just to inform everyone as well. I mean, when we issue the report, it goes to the legislature, to the General Assembly, it goes to the governor's office, and then we use it to determine if there's education that needs to be done, whether it's at the business or the consumer level. We use it for our policy. Like, one of the jobs that the administrator has is to inform the legislature and the governor on issues that affect consumers over at the State House. And so today, as a matter of fact, I'll be going to testify on a bill. It's S700 called Earned Wage Access. So we'll be able to use some of this information to inform the legislators so they can determine what the policy is that they would like to set in the state. Thanks for joining us. Hope to see you on another presentation soon, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.